You are listening to WXRWLP Milwaukee on 104.1 FM and riverwestradio.com on your phone. You can now listen by saying, Alexa, play WXRW, or Hey Google, play River West Radio on TuneIn. Support for this program comes from Collectivo Coffee, dedicated to keeping Milwaukee's bike riding community rolling with bike pumps available for use in all Collectivo cafes. More info is available in cafes and at collectivocoffee.com. Go Pack for sure forever. Yes, the Packers. Anyway, Cinema Fireside. If you're well, first of all, thank you for listening in. Oh, excellent. Gabe, thank you for calling in. If you're listening live, it's a snowstorm in Milwaukee. That may seem like a hyperbolic statement, but you got to drive slow. Sometimes traffic was crawling, and unfortunately, there was an accident right on the corner right here. I hope everyone's okay. That car looks like it ain't going nowhere for a while. But anyway, that's just a cautionary tale because you got to take it easy out there. Of course, you guys are listening at home by the Fireside, so just if you do venture out, drive safe. Suki had a great show. Appreciate her warm presence. Always a good thing. And it seems like a cozy evening at the radio station with some of the usual suspects keeping a robust camaraderie going here. So that's great. And again, Gabe, thank you so much for co-hosting this. Yes, some cars are definitely crawling along outside, so that's a good thing. So yeah, what a wild life! Oh, what a wild life for sure. So some films to be discussed is Anthony Mann's Side Street, Nicholas Ray's They Live by Night, Thelma, and Peter Bogdanovich's What's Up, Doc? Where does one begin? So I got a double DVD of noir films from the fine people at River West for the show. I don't think I had seen either one before. Anthony Mann's Side Street takes place in New York City, and it makes use of New York City, the buildings. It's a great time capsule, and that's what films are a good thing. They serve that purpose, is historical artifacts, and to see eras and architecture and people from other times is something that's quite rewarding. And I have a respect for Anthony Mann, and when you watch noir, actually both films I think starred Farley Granger, and a distinct attribute of 40s films is extremely melodramatic acting, and Farley Granger is one of the kings of overacting. His face is very imposing in a melodramatic way, and it takes a lot of energy actually to deal with overacting when in real life and in contemporary films of the last 40 years there's far more natural alliance to reality and acting styles. And what happens when you watch melodramas is that your psychology gets a little bit off kilter because you're like, why are these people so hepped up all the time? And it is latently or subtextually psychologically jarring a little bit, and being exposed to stuff like that. But anyway, yeah. Then I saw They Live by Night, directed by Nicholas Ray, who's from La Crosse, Wisconsin, as well as director Joseph Lucy. Nicholas Ray, of course, directed Rebel Without a Cause. And actually, Patrick McGilligan, he's a renowned author of cinema books. He's here in Milwaukee, and he wrote the large tome, one of the most recent Orson Welles books, about his doings prior to Citizen Kane. And Mr. McGilligan has also authored the bio on Nicholas Ray, which I'm reading. The Wells book is 700 some pages. I think I've only got like just a handful of pages left, and just a fascinating book. And Nicholas Ray, I've got to find out where that is and dig back in. Actually, my colleague provided me with the director's event, a book interviewing in depth 5 directors. First one I read was Peter Bogdanovich's interview, and it's actually helpful because it's not so much talk in the abstract, but rather more in an empirical light, as in hands-on filmmaking and dealing with footage and compositions and using color and so on and so forth, color schematics within, talking about mise-en-scène, all of that. And so it was very informative. So I allied that with seeing What's Up Doc by Mr. Bogdanovich. If you're into 70s decor, go for it. Definitely What's Up Doc. It stars Ryan O'Neal and Barbara Streisand. And it's kind of almost a hybrid between like Stanley Kramer's It's a Mad, 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 Mad World and Orson Welles' Get to Know Your Rabbit. No, not Orson Welles' Get to Know Your Rabbit. Brian De Palma's Get to Know Your Rabbit. So it has that absurdist quality into it, of it, that when the late 60s and early 70s included within the pantheon of experimental filmmaking was one of the genres within experimental filmmaking was absurdity, and something like Get to Know Your Rabbit would fall into that. So What's Up Doc is kind of a Hollywood take seasoned with that absurdity. So if you are interested in those ideas, and again, when you think about Peter Bogdanovich and you think about The Last Picture Show, which is a work of art, and then compare it to the man, what was going on? Why did he make something like What's Up Doc? It's like it plummets the integrity between Last Picture Show and What's Up Doc. It just plummets. What Last Picture Show is a work of art. What's Up Doc is a piece of star-fueled absurdity. But what was amazing about it is in the Bogdanovich interview in the director's event, he had only made one picture at that point, and that was Targets with the interview of the book. So this is when he's really in his formative realm. And he said, someday I'd like to make a action picture, which is What's Up Doc with car chases, which brings me back to, what's the Anthony Mann film? Side Street. Yes, Side Street in New York. So you actually have a car chase in an exterior environment, a real environment, instead of a Hollywood backlot. Because when you start to think about, if you think about it, that in the golden age of Hollywood, they used backlots, and you jump ahead to something like Dirty Harry, and you actually see a modern city, or Bullet as well, in San Francisco, a modern car chase that's not taking place in a backlot. So you're actually starting to see cities across the United States being used as they really are, and you begin to notice that shift into modernity of getting off the backlot. And Side Street, even though I think it was late 40s, actually had car chases on the street, so that's a precursor, a prefatory foreshadowing of like something like Bullet and so on and so forth. When I saw, let's say Lady Bird, which is a very well-crafted Hollywood film, but that's all it is. There's hundreds like it. I had an opportunity on Saturday evening, and Gabe, I got you. I'm looking at the clock, my man, to see Thelma on the big screen at the university. That film has stuck with me for days. I don't, if you're a ding-dong or something like that, you're not going to get the film, and I just stay away from it because it's a European film. It has a temporal pace that's daunting to the schizophrenia of American or the American audience like a populist wouldn't be able to handle it. It's like, why is this going so slow? Why do I have to think about things? Why do I have to deal with analogies and metaphors and so forth? So, yeah, if you're normal in that, yeah, stay away from Thelma. But if you've got some brain cells, go see it. So that's stuck with me for days. And what's interesting about that, it's a European film. Its temporal pace is akin to A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night from Iran, I believe. And my memory is really fading. The Swedish film with the vampire, which is very, very obvious, and now it's just plummeted. My memory is shot. I can't. It's a very obvious film. I saw it twice. What's interesting about, and I was thinking about Europe versus America, and I was introduced to this concept decades ago by seeing David Cronenberg's The Brood. I've seen all of his films, from Stereo and Crimes of the Future to whatever was after Cosmopolis, which is Maps to the Stars. Okay, so anyway, what I noticed was European architectural sensibilities versus American. In an American classroom, you basically got tile floors and plaster walls, and in Europe they have very elegant wooden stylings of interiors. There's an interesting thing because Canada is kind of like a hybrid between North American design and European. So when you see something like Thelma, it's you see these interior sensibilities that you don't see in the States. If you go to the university here, like I said, it's just like a plaster wall, and it's like, oh man, and you go over there, and it's like I say, these all different kinds of modern sensibilities of design and so on and so forth. It's beyond utilitarian. Here, it seems just very utilitarian. So anyway, yeah, and one of the things too, and I will get to you, Gabe, in a second here, with Thelma, is that when you deal with metaphor and realize all of these metaphors taking place, you think, well, have I gotten on top of the metaphor game, or is something so complex that it's eluding me because this metaphor is so obvious that how could that be? So you deal with all of that. I'm going to let Gabe on the phone, but and then in one of the film journals, I read a capsule review of Thelma. I hesitated because I want to write about it, and I am not going to be influenced by anyone else, but these reviews are so alternate that it's like, oh, well, none of the elements that I was concerned about really are being addressed here, except for the obvious kind of, if not homage, but similarity with Carrie and telekinesis. That's the only thing that my writing and their writing had a similarity to. But anyway, I this is crazy. Gabe is a good man. He needs to get on the phone. Gabe, how you doing, my man?
Excellent, Mark. Excellent stuff. Just really, really good stuff, Mark. I love what you brought up. In the interim, since I've been on here, oh man, there have been a ton of films that got seen. There were 2 documentaries that I'd seen weeks ago that I never brought up. 3 actually. But just to get them out of the way that I had seen it, I did. HBO is regularly producing just outstanding documentaries. I've spent many instances describing their style. They're just out. They're
dude. Happy birthday!
And thank you. Yes,
happy birthday! Martin had told me that it's possible. Someone just let me know. I'd be remiss not to say it because it would elude me. I'd get hypnotized. Suki says happy birthday to you, Gabe. Thumbs up.
I love it.
So yes. So happy birthday, Gabe.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you all. Thank you guys. Yeah, it's B-Day time. It's straight up Beyonce B-Day, so it's good stuff. Things have been going good. But HBO produced this great documentary, Bowie, The Last 5 Years, which is a really excellent the first half an hour of the film, I'd say 45 minutes, is just the best documentary about David Bowie ever made. It's visually, there's like previously unseen footage, all this sort of, it isn't just the same exhausted stuff looked at over and over again, the same footage that was compiled in other documentaries or in TV footage or whatever. It's stuff that's very candid and very strange and just very ordinary in the best possible way, where it just captures him in his natural state, sort of. It's very cinema verite stuff, except it's home movie looking, because a lot of it appears to have been just like people that were his friends that captured him, or these, stage performances where the camera just is there. And it goes throughout the years, and it looks at Bowie's career in this very perceptive light of what he was emotionally going through, not necessarily what his music was going through. And then it looks at that. It looks at what Bowie did in the last 5 years of his life, and really how interesting his music and his performance art and what he gave and what he wanted to achieve as he was struggling with the fact that he had cancer. So it's a great documentary. It's really personal. And it also uncovers a lot of stuff that I didn't know about. And I love David Bowie. I've been a lifelong David Bowie fan. And it was still illuminating. So great stuff there. If you're a David Bowie fan, or if you're just interested in, iconic, important, true artistry in rock music, performance art, and the mainstream avant-garde, David Bowie is, both in terms of his music and in terms of his legacy, is just an unparalleled, not to say that he's the greatest or the best, but in terms of his legacy, there is no one like David Bowie. His acting career is very peculiar and storied. His music career is very storied. Every album of David Bowie has a very particular placement in the archaeology and the discography of his entire work. So if you look at his music, highly recommend. Whenever people ask me about David Bowie, because I am a huge fan, and they say, where should I listen? I'm like, just the great albums that he did in the 70s and a handful of the electronic albums that he did in the late 90s and the stuff that he did in the last 7 years of his life, although I'd say the last decade and a half of his life. Very similar to Bob Dylan's, like this long, storied, changing history of a very, very, very talented performer and writer, poet, what have you. So great film there. Nothing. I mean, it's not it's not distinguished in its filmmaking, but it is extremely. It's something that gets across its message very well, and that's what HBO documentary films does very well. Gilbert, which is available on the Hulu streaming service, is a very well-made documentary about Gilbert Gottfried, and it's really revealing and showing the real Gilbert Gottfried. And it's just very cinema verite. It's very natural. It's very upfront, and it just shows the difference between Gilbert Gottfried, the comedian that we know, and who the man really is. Very interesting, very well-made film. Highly recommended for anyone who's a fan of stand-up comedy or a fan of Gilbert Gottfried.
I think Mike Offerosky digs Gilbert Gottfried, so that he will be charmed to hear that.
Well, Offerosky put that on his best films of the year list, and I would say that that's a very welcome addition on a list. It's a very absorbing, touching, heartwarming, but not at the expense of rigorous examination. It never, documentaries that don't go into the abstract sort of only go so far for me. Mm-hmm. Documentaries that don't go into the territory of blurring into fiction or blurring into surrealism with their whether it's their visuals, the means and the timeline of conveying the events or the message of the film or the involvement of that line, but sort of like fourth wall breaking stuff in terms of audience involvement in the film, or the use of characters in the film, like the way that talking heads sort of go into this other space where documentaries really can become these otherworldly works of art, not just these sort of like A&E biography pieces where the camera looks at talking heads talk about said subject, and the history of the subject is unveiled using a very well put together montage, and you go over these different eras of the person's life, talking to different key. It's like episodes of A&E biography, which is an exquisite show. And those movies are very fine. But when you get into stuff like Gimme Shelter or Grey Gardens, the PBS work of Frederick Wiseman, there's just so much available terrain to go into with abstract documentary. So stuff that doesn't go into the abstract, it just feels like like I've read a really good nonfiction book about the subject, or I've learned a lot and I enjoyed my time, and it's like you've spent time with this person, but it's not the same as watching an artful film and having an artful experience. So yeah, another entry in that would be the film Rats, which is Morgan Spurlock's latest documentary. Morgan Spurlock is the other sort of pop magician filmmaker besides Alex Gibney, and Michael Moore would fall into this category of populist documentary filmmaker. But all three of those guys definitely have earned their status and their stripes by putting in the time and doing the work and choosing their subjects thoughtfully and carefully, and putting the research behind it, and also going for the gold and really getting in there and looking and interviewing people and asking tough questions. Ken Burns, obviously one of the greatest living, not just documentary filmmakers, but filmmakers. And I am still piling into his 18 hours, the Vietnam War, watching. I'm on episode 7 right now, so I'm nearing the end, and I don't have much new to report about it other than that it's just an exhaustive and extremely rewarding look at a time period that really helped define who we are today. Just exceptional work from an exceptional filmmaker, but again, it does not stray into that category of the abstract. So it is another Ken Burns film, and if you love Ken Burns films as much as I do, that's not a diss by any means. And then I saw 5 other films, so we had a busy week.
Yes,
Molly's
you did.
Game, which is Aaron Sorkin's latest film, and it's his first foray into directing. It's an exquisite feature. It doesn't tackle anything real tough, but it's a really well-made biographical sketch of and it's an interesting look at poker, and it shows and demonstrates poker as a weapon, as an art form, and as a sport, unlike any film I've ever seen before, which is saying a lot because I've seen poker used really well. I've seen cards and poker used really well in a lot of films in the past, but I'd say Casino Royale from 2006 is probably the best use of a poker game ever, where it's a metaphor, where it's symbolic, where it isn't just the acrobatics of what's put on screen using editing and using cinematography, but it's symbolic of a different conflict going on through the film. And the fact that Casino Royale is actually a weirdly artful film that, besides being a really good action film and a great James Bond vehicle, it was actually an interesting character study of numerous characters. So, and the poker match in the middle of that film was like this extended climax. But Molly's Game leaves that film in the dust with its use of card playing. It's just a really, really, really well-made film. But again, it has this sort of verbal martial arts that only Aaron Sorkin can do. And at times it just gets it gets tiresome because Aaron Sorkin has said on record, I listened to 2 interviews that he gave. I read an interview and then I listened to an interview that he gave about this film, and he said both times, I do not deal with reality in my films. I'm not looking for realism. I am not seeking realism. This is theater on film. But ultimately this is film. and he's a perfectionist about his final product. He makes sure that every syllable, every cue, every gesture, especially, I mean, as a writer, he made sure that every word of his screenplay made it onto screen. But now as a filmmaker, he's made sure that basically the performers are like props. Spielberg has been accused of being the sort of micromanager perfectionist of using puppets, using actors as tools at times. Sometimes he has the exact opposite approach, depending on what kind of a day he's having or what kind of a film he's making. But looking at the finished product of what Molly's Game is as a film, it's exciting, it's intelligent, and it's intelligent is really what I was left with at the end, is that this is a really exciting, really fast-paced film about adults, for adults. Jessica Chastain is wonderful, as always. She gives a great performance. Costume design in the film is exquisite. The art decoration and set decoration is always wonderful. The supporting players are just constantly providing this livid. There's never a dull moment. Everything is constantly. There's always this ebb and flow of conflict, resolution, conflict, and there's layers of actual text. And of course, because this is Aaron Sorkin, there's layers of melodramatic subtext. Both like literally to be inferred in what are the emotions that the characters are consciously, subtextually conveying to each other. You know, there's like the conversation on the base layer of the words that they're saying to each other. There's the subtext of what the characters are saying or meaning or giving off to each other. And then there's this other layer of what am I getting out of this? Sorkin is an extraordinary writer and playwright and teleplaywriter in that his dialogue has this sort of acrobatic efficiency that no other contemporary screenwriter has, but it's oftentimes at the expense of subtlety. You know, it doesn't have the poetic nuance of some of the great screenwriters, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it doesn't even have the subtleties of like what Mark is talking about with like these more European films, so these films that are real thoughtful and slow moving by our standards in the West, but films that are deliberate and intentional and have the time to pay attention to what every minute, every second means, and what the minutia of a film where you don't have 50 cuts every second, every minute.
Right. And
it's just done at a different pace. And you're right, Mark. You couldn't be more right that American audiences just are not accustomed to that. Molly's Game is a really fast cut film too, and it goes at that it's very Western, it's very American, but it's smart. And so it's definitely mainstream entertainment, it's a Hollywood film, but it's a smart Hollywood film. I strongly recommend it. I wouldn't quite put it on the best of the year list, but I would put it on the category just below that of extremely highly recommended, because of the fact that you're dealing with such intelligence and you're dealing with things that are not. You're dealing with story, acting, directing that's not insulting. You're dealing with stuff that's not even next level, that's beyond that. Sorkin is of a master of craft that is so admirable that to miss a film of his is like, you're like, ugh, who cares? Who cares about one of the greatest screenwriters of our time? Like, it should not be missed. But it is not like high art at the same token. So, but very, very, very well, very good entertainment. So lately, we're gearing up for the Academy Awards. So I've been mostly, I'd say about 3/4 of the films that I'm watching up until the ceremony, up until I'm done prepping for the ceremony.
When is the ceremony, my man? Is it reverted back to early March again?
Yep, they did, and I'm very grateful that they did. For a while they were going to like February 19th, February 20th, and stuff like that. Now they're back to early March.
Nice.
So it gives everyone a lot of time to prep and to get ready. And to be honest, of what I've seen so far of the foreign films and the documentaries, that's the strongest. Those are the strongest categories, as they usually are. the best films that you're going to usually see of anything nominated for the Academy Award, there's usually two films that are nominated for Best Picture that are these these art house, really thought-provoking, genuine works of avant-garde art. This year we have one entry in that category, which is Phantom Thread, Paul Thomas Anderson's newest film, which stands alone in a different class against all the other films that are nominated for any award in any category. Almost undisputably considered probably the most I wouldn't say challenging, but just Paul Thomas Anderson works on a level and with a craftsmanship and with a deliberation and a product that no one else. I don't want to say equals, because I don't always find his films as rewarding as some other people do, but you're just dealing with a fine artist. You're dealing with fine art, and you're dealing with stuff that operates at different levels, and that it's just a different product altogether. It's a different type of film. But the stuff that always gets nominated for foreign film, for Best Foreign Film and Best Documentary, what I like about the Academy Awards, and it's really they're the only categories that I'm always blown away by how intelligent and rewarding and emotionally satisfying and to be honest, exposing their film selections are. Because if you look at it on a globe, not always, but usually if you were to trace out on a globe, okay, where are the five nominees? Where are the five nominated films from? You actually see a good spacing out geographically of different continents and different countries and different regions of the world. So you've got all these different areas of the world that are represented. And if you do documentary and Best Foreign Film, oftentimes the documentaries are foreign films as well. So you get, usually 3 out of 5 of the documentaries are foreign films themselves. So you get other countries thrown in there as well. So usually you have 8 different countries around the world represented between these two categories. And you've got different styles of documentaries. Oftentimes you're dealing with a filmmaker this is their first feature or their second feature or their first major feature. So there's a sort of excitement and a real grit and a real energy to try new things with the form. So oftentimes these films are nominated because they've stood out in terms of the fact that they do take risks. They take those types of risks with documentary that I love, that I live for, where it's not just a procedural film doing procedural stuff and uncovering just information, where it's looking at the context and the subtext of who, what relationships are and the choices that people make, and ultimately what those choices and what those effects, those lingering effects are, especially on families and communities, and the long and their relationship to that long echo of time and loss and memory. So a movie I've seen 4 of the nominees for Best Documentary, and they're all exceptional in varying ways. But the real standout in terms of art, in terms of a film that takes a stand as a really unique art form in terms of its shooting style, in terms of its narrative force, is Strong Island, which is available on Netflix. But it makes the other nominees that I've seen for documentaries seem almost tame, almost rudimentary, almost standard, even though they're also very, they're high-level works of art. But Strong Island stands out among the other nominees as just being such a unique, thoughtful work of art that doesn't grab for tears. It isn't maudlin. It isn't obviously melodramatic or it doesn't. It's not an easy film to classify, because it goes about in a very its narrative twists and turns, and its perspective twists and turns, and it takes some risks with its visual presentation that I think a lot of film professors would have advised against, but ultimately they're brilliant, and they all work in different ways. It's not like, oh, that either works or it doesn't work. It's not objective. It's not something that's finite. It's that it had a reaction in my mind, in my body, in my soul. It left me stunned, just because it was a visual work of art that absolutely worked for me. Highly recommended stuff. Strong Island. Some of the other nominees: Icarus, which was a very politically charged film about the doping scandal. Highly recommended stuff. It falls into that sort of procedural, standard operating procedure stuff, but it's very well made and has some great, has great characters in it. Some great perspective. The Last Men in Aleppo is sure to be the crowd favorite because it's sort of a continuation of the White Helmets from last year, which won Best Documentary Subject at the Academy Awards, and it's a very tough subject. It made me break down in tears several times. It's about the White Helmets, the rescue workers in Syria, in Aleppo, during these bombing raids that the Russians and that the Syrians are subjecting to their own people. And I'll tell you, man, just footage of dead infants being pulled out from the rubble, it just.
You all right, my man?
Yeah.
That was dramatically put, I may say.
It just never fails to. I was going into this film just expecting. I knew what I was going into. I knew I was going to see a film where there was, you're dealing with the White Helmets, you're dealing with innocent civilians being killed and being subjected to unspeakable human atrocities and dealing with incredible, unspeakable loss. And the way that it sneaks into their lives, not sneaks, but the way it molds into their lives, and you really spend time with these people. You see them over the course of months and months and months, and you gain access into their intimate relationships and their the choices that they make and the reasons that they continue to put themselves in the front line of danger to selflessly help these other people and to help save. And I mean, you're talking seconds and minutes are of the absolute essence. And, when you've got hundreds and thousands of pounds of building material that is just turned into dust, and, the stuff weighs thousands of pounds and they're crushing, and people are, suffocating to death or being crushed physically by the second. And their response time means the difference between life or death in people. But I will never forget these images of these infants being pulled out of the rubble. And there are two in particular. One of them nearly opens the film. It's like 3 minutes in, and it just completely baffled me. There's a candidness to the way it was shot, and the way that it was dealt with in the characters and in the subjects, because they're so used to seeing this stuff that it almost doesn't register at first. They are so constantly in the depths of dealing with death and unspeakable tragedy that it doesn't even hit them it's just another day on the job of dealing with dead children. And that's what war is. I mean, that is war. But this documentary goes to great pains and lengths and personal loss to document it, and it does an incredibly good job. Again, it doesn't take any artistic risks, and there's a few sequences that do. There are two sequences where it goes off into actual, I'd say, narrative obscurity, and I was very surprised because the rest of the film is so unlike that it just seemed I'd say it was almost at the expense of the film, because it's so notable it's so obvious what the filmmakers are doing that it almost it doesn't feel like it comes from a place of integrity. It feels like it comes from a place of, let's make this film less objective, less pointedly a work of journalism, and let's make this film more of an artistic statement. And it felt almost intrusive and disingenuous. It was my only complaint about the film. But there is this image of this infant being handed down from one level to another, and his head is just bobbing around on his body like a doll, and I just will never ever be able to forget that image. There's a scene where they find there's this part where they're rummaging through a building that's been half blown up, and they're finding body parts, like they're just dealing with car parts. And these are people that have just been on the front lines and have dealt with, they've been doing this for however long, and you just see the change in their demeanor and even just in their eyes. Highly recommended stuff.
Yeah, thanks for that dire recap of what you saw. Definitely, man. And how are you doing, Gabe, by the way?
Oh, I'm doing great, Mark. We're, my girlfriend and I are gearing up for a good move. Interpersonal relations are at an all-time high in my life. Personal conquest and the challenges I choose to take on, the challenges that I choose to not take on. I'd say I'm doing the work I need to do, and I'm not fighting the fights that are not worth fighting, and fighting the ones that are worth fighting. And
you're choosing your battles.
Yes, choosing the battles. And I'll tell you, man, the war and the battles of life, because life is a struggle. It really is. But it doesn't have to be painful all the time. It doesn't have to be so Scandinavian. So
that's funny.
It can go both ways. Life is very serious, and it's very real, and it's very,
depending on your perspective.
Exactly. But physically, the day is composed of day and night. So, but personally, I've always been a person who's
what did you just say,
enjoyed,
my man? Physically, life is composed of day and night?
Of the Earth day,
Yeah.
Physically, the day is composed of day and night.
Right, highly reductive, but equally highly as impactful. Thank you. Night and day, okay, my man. That's funny, too.
It's just a fact, it's day and night.
Right,
but I've always been a person who's gravitated towards the nighttime. So
right.
I think that it says a lot about my habits that I had for a long time as an adult, and a lot of time, like Mark, you and I both talked about on the show many times. A lot of years spent wasted, but
right.
Just it literally and figuratively. But man, that's not the case today.
That would be correct.
Man, that is not the case today. So it is good to be wide awake, and it is good to have all my senses to the best of my ability with me, without knowingly impairing them. It's just today that just seems like just such an absurd choice to make at this point in my life. For other people in other situations with other prerogatives, that's not an insane choice to make. That's not a judgment that I can make on other people, because their lives are their own lives. It's not my job, it's not my right to choose or judge what other people do with their time, because my experience is, I've had very negative experiences with the consequences of the choices that I've made through a large portion of my adult life. And finally choosing to change that narrative, it requires courage, it requires strength, and it requires integrity and discipline and honesty. And, whether it's, people, some people have a problem with compulsively lying, some people have a problem with gambling, some people have a problem with food, some people have a problem sleeping, people wanting to sleep too much. But it's just addressing, if there's an issue in your life, taking the courage to try and fix it. And to be honest, no one can fix all their problems alone. It's not possible. There's certain problems that some people can fix without ever getting help, but the level of help, the level of quality help that they can, of change, of goodness, of joy, of gratitude that they can have in their life, can ultimately, it's it's endless. It's like it's exponential if you open yourself to other people, to be vulnerable, and to care enough about yourself to be willing to show that part of yourself to other people. But if you go through a struggle alone, your chances of coming out on the other end joyful and healed and to grow as a human being is much less. So that's the courage that I've taken definitely in the last few years, and especially in the last year of my life, is the willingness to be honest about things that have been less than admirable at certain points in my life.
Well, you know what, Gabe? I think I'm getting the answer to the question I asked.
Thanks, Mark. Mark, I took some notes on your monologue, on your statements in the game.
Oh yeah.
So I wanted to add to some stuff here and have a discussion. Farley Granger, I've seen him in a few films, but I have to agree, he's got that real he's got that style of acting that came into prominence in the 30s and the 40s. Thank you. But in Strangers on a Train, he's incredible. It's the one performance that I'd say is above and beyond, and that really goes into this other territory of psychological realism. But I think that's because Hitchcock directed that film, and that's an exquisitely crafted movie. That's one of the great. That's one of Hitchcock's greatest films in some ways, but part of that's is the fact that that's based on such good material. And to some degree, that movie falls into these trappings of a more mainstream, less psychologically understated film like Rebecca, where you're dealing with subtext primarily. Strangers in a Train is a plot mechanic film where you're dealing with obvious motives, obvious interactions, but it's still exquisitely made. Peter Bogdanovich, we're going to do to our listeners, we are going to do a Peter Bogdanovich show of sorts in the future. I had talked to Mark about gathering, I was going to watch, I don't know how available they might be to Mark, but possibly at River West Film and Video. I don't know if they have copies, but
talk to me, hit me with some titles, my man.
At Long Last Love from 75, which would probably be easier to get a hold of. But the challenging one is They All Laughed, which is, a very infamous, notorious film. That was a film that bombed and almost sent Bogdanovich into an irreversible career suicide. But it's a notable film, and it became extremely sought after about 10 years ago when Quentin Tarantino put it on his 10 best list of his 10 favorite films of all time. So its reputation, its sought after quality, I should say, soared, and people definitely reevaluated the film. It started playing at revival houses and stuff like that in Hollywood and New York and Chicago. So it's had a new life. But Bogdanovich is just such an illustrious, interesting career on so many levels, on just the history of Hollywood, the history of pop culture, his placement in just being at certain places at certain times, not the right place or right time, oftentimes the wrong place at the wrong time. But Mark is absolutely right. If you anyone who hasn't seen The Last Picture Show, that's one of the great films of 1971, which is a great year for filmmaking all over the world. But especially in English and American films, you're dealing with a new type of cinema where America becomes the leader in sort of this new type of avant-garde high art film, becoming the sort of norm for studios and mainstream filmgoers. You have a type of characterization and a type of visual filmmaking that's unprecedented in terms of consistent in terms of studios consistently getting behind this kind of product. It's just unprecedented. Bogdanovich is definitely part of that. So previous to his career, just starting out as a filmmaker, he had been a film scholar. He grew up just being in love with films, and he slowly came into fold with the filmmakers that he had been enamored with, that he had watched obsessively as a kid. He started to, and he came from intellectual parents, And he eventually, when he came to Hollywood and started off as a film writer, and he got his break with Roger Corman and Samuel Arkoff with at AIP Pictures, American International Pictures, with Targets. But he had a chance to get to know these great legends of the Hollywood studio system before they died, and he became very close friends with Howard Hawks, with John Ford, I believe Michael Curtiz, but Hawks, Huston, and Ford were the big three, like his heroes, his favorite filmmakers. So The Last Picture Show comes out of his own filmmaking, his own style. It's sort of an homage to some of the new styles of dramatic license that the French New Wave had taken within the last 10 years. And it's also some of the subterranean psychological text that he felt that directors like Anthony, it's funny you bring up Anthony Mann, because that was a major director in the formative style of what he was looking for, especially the films that Anthony Mann made with Jimmy Stewart, where there's, yes, like a plot narrative that's going on the surface, but where there's all this subtext, both in terms of what the director is trying to convey to the audience and what the characters are silently withholding and conveying to each other within the film. And Anthony Mann, in some ways, you could say, some people say John Ford is this great poetic filmmaker, and he's one of the on again, off again, yes, that has moments of truth and clarity and where I would have to agree with that from time to time. But I would say dealing with like filmmakers more like John Huston, Anthony Mann, and Howard Hawks, you have much more of that, and you have more a more entertaining product because you're dealing with things that are less obsessed with their own mystification. Mark, you've said many times we are in an age of over mystification. I couldn't agree with that more.
Right. Well, yeah. But I didn't say specifically this age, but yeah, it's the fallacy of mythology and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That's I don't buy into that in any way, shape, or form.
You. No, I couldn't agree more. And I feel like sometimes when film writers have mythologized, like John Ford, it's just it's just so absurd. Like, Mark, you and I have discussed this, like, watch a movie like The Searchers, and I'm like, what are they talking about?
Right.
Like, what are you talking about? Yes, this is a very, very pretty film. This is a very interesting film at times. But this is also a very laborious, very one-dimensional movie that I think has, yes, some of this implied poetry in it and some of this implied psychology, but it is just so bad on so many other levels that that's just a film that has beguiled me and it baffles me still. But yeah, Peter Bogdanovich was enamored with these great poets of these proclaimed auteurs that the French New Wave specifically, whose films inspired in many ways the films of the French New Wave, of the filmmakers at Cahiers du Cinema, the writers at Cahiers du Cinema, some of which, not all of which, some of which. That's a major misconception right there too, is that all the critics that worked at Cahiers, not true during that period. It was about a third of them went on to sort of form this group, later known as the French New Wave, or known as the Nouvelle Vague at the time. But our understanding of them now, things have been left out, things have been added, things have been changed, and our mystification or mythologizing over time has changed its importance or changed its timeline or its rhetoric. But Bogdanovich was equally enamored with the films and the filmmakers that the French New Wave filmmakers and writers were enamored with. And so Bogdanovich makes this just stunning film in 1971, the Last Picture Show, which by and large was critically looked at as the best feature film debut besides Citizen Kane ever made. And was widely considered by some people to be the best film of this new generation of filmmakers. Like, you've got Haskell Wexler making these new types, these new types of films are emerging. Bullitt in '67 basically single-handedly invents the action film as a visual and as a style of film, a type of film, a subjective experience that's based on, yes, subjective styles of filmmaking, but has a different kind of energy and motive that had never appeared in a film before, where it's just unrelenting, and that there's a poetry to that, and that continues to this day. The action film is something that I think has not quite gotten its due. But to be in its fairness, there's probably only about 300 action films that I would say fall into this category of works of art.
Yep.
I would say that's actually cutting it short, because there's a lot of films that are coming out all over the world that I've never seen and never will see that probably are great, but Bogdanovich makes this new type of film in '71 with The Last Picture. Not new type of film, but makes this stunning film, '71. He's looked at as this, these filmmakers are looked at these new types of these artist filmmakers, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, William Friedkin. They have the world at their hands, and they're making these huge blockbusters. Like, William Friedkin is making record amounts of money. Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather is the highest grossing film in history, and they're considered monumental works of art.
Absolutely.
So Bogdanovich's film doesn't necessarily do that great at the box office, but it's considered this outstanding, unparalleled artistic achievement of the era.
That's right. And also, too, Gabe, I may add that we're going to be wrapping up the show now, and I really actually from the heart wish you a happy, very, very happy birthday, and as others here do as well. And we all wish you a happy birthday. And
thank you, Mark. Thank you. Best wishes to everyone listening, everyone at River West Radio and at River West Film and Video, of course. My good friends back in Milwaukee and my good friends down here in Kansas City. Thank you all. What a life! We'll continue our coverage of Peter Bogdanovich next week or in the ascending weeks. Mark, as always, thank you. Great stuff, man. Great show.
All right, Gabe. God bless you, and good night.
God bless you, too. Later. Bye-bye.
Okay, that was Gabe Van Handel, and he does his research. He brings his passion to the airways. We appreciate that. And we've got various people. I've got one person looking directly at me, and one person outside the window, one in the facility. It's kind of geometrically funny at the moment, and then someone actually made me smile walking out. Unexpected character with some cooking book. It almost looked like Vermeer on the cover. But anyway, just gave me that knowing look about life and went on. So that was kind of funny in a very good way. And got Tom here. He's an excellent soul. And I just drive safe out there. It's it's snowing, that's for sure. I'll go home and read that Graham Nash autobiography. So thanks for listening. We will be on at the same time next week on WXRWLP 104.1 FM Milwaukee. To hear past episodes, visit riverwestradio.com/shows and click Cinema Fireside.